Welcome to Martha Runs the World, a podcast with a new take on running, fitness, and all things health-oriented. I'm Martha Hughes, your host, and each week I present a new topic that is of interest to all runners. Hi, and welcome to episode 318 of Martha Runs the World. How are you today? I'm doing great. Oh, back to work after a wonderful vacation. It's hard going back to work after I've been off for a while. It's been a long time since I've taken a vacation, so getting back into the swing of work is a lot of work. I know that sounds weird, but I finished up a full week of work. I have a couple days off, then I go back, and then I have 4 days off. As I've said many times, I have a weird work schedule, but it's okay. It works out okay for me, and I kind of like the schedule that I have. You're in the middle of a really tough race. In fact, this race is a lot harder than you ever thought it would be. You planned for it, but maybe you've never done this type of a race before. Maybe the trail is different than any other trail you've ever been on before. Maybe the road race that you are doing has more hills than you've ever run on, or maybe it's flat and you're not used to flat. But so you're thinking to yourself, it would be so easy to pull out of this race and claim a DNF, did not finish. It's not that big of a deal, right? But then you think, you've worked hard for this race, this finish. Maybe you've traveled a long ways. Maybe you've flown and you had to rent a car and a hotel. There's a lot of money in that. Maybe you've been training for weeks or months. Maybe this is a race that's hard to get into. Maybe you won a lottery to get into this race. So a DNF isn't really what you want, is it? How do you keep yourself going so that all of a sudden you don't come up with a case of Give-Up-Itis? Now, Give-Up-Itis isn't one time giving up. Give-Up-Itis is a series of giving up on training runs, on races, so you kind of get used to it, so it becomes a matter of fact, a constant, maybe not a constant thing, but it's a usual thing that it all of a sudden isn't a big deal that you give up. I actually found myself getting into that kind of a thing a little while ago, saying, well, on my training runs, well, maybe I won't do a full training run this week. Maybe I'll just cut it short a couple miles. It's not a big deal. And maybe I won't go out today, maybe I'll go out tomorrow, and then something comes up and I don't go out tomorrow. And then all of a sudden in a race, you can't do the full race because you haven't trained well enough. That happened to me in the Hunter Thompson 50K. I really wasn't trained well enough for that. And I think every runner, or nearly every runner, during their lifetime of running goes through this at least once. Maybe things happen in life. And when this starts to happen, it gets easier to fall into the Give-Up-Itis. And today I'm going to go through what it is and why it happens and how we can pull ourselves out of it. And I kind of talked about already what it is. And it's not just one time. If you just fall into DNF once, that's not really what it is. But if you fall into giving up on your training runs or getting DNFs in a few races, at maybe 3 or 4 races in a row where you're giving up, maybe you're falling into the Give-Up-Itis. So let's go over why it can happen, or how it can happen, I should say. And it can for a variety of reasons, and these are some of the reasons how it can happen. You've been pushing yourself too hard and your body is tired. So maybe you run too many times a week. Maybe you run 7 days a week and you run a lot of miles all those 7 days. That's pushing yourself too much. You just don't want to run those last couple miles because you're really, really tired. And maybe your body is trying to tell you to take it easy. Maybe cutting a few miles short on the run really won't hurt you. Maybe taking some rest time would be appropriate. You're building up too many miles too quickly. Now, this happens when you're chasing running goals that maybe are too much for you. Maybe you've done your first 50K and then all of a sudden, I did a 50K, so now I want to do 50 miles. And the 50 miles is maybe a couple months away. Well, that really isn't the smartest way to do things. Your body just got used to doing a 50K, so maybe do another 50K or a couple more before you jump to a 50 miler. It really isn't the smartest thing to keep jumping to longer and longer distances until you get used to those long distances in the first place. It's easy to get caught up into doing what races others are doing. So if other people are doing races, the distances that you want to do, it's really easy to get caught up and say, well, I want to do that too. But is that the right distance for you? Is your body used to doing those distances or more used to doing long distances enough for you to jump to a longer distance? That's really something you have to ask yourself before you continue to jump to longer distances. Maybe your friends are running a full marathon, but you're not ready. But they keep talking about it, and you really want to do it, and you don't want to miss out. FOMO, fear of missing out, is a cause for Give-Up-Itis many times. So really, don't get caught up with what your friends are doing. Trying to do what you want to do or what you should do rather than what your friends are doing. There's also that popular but possibly harmful attitude of go big or go home. No, that doesn't always work. Really, don't follow that. That's a machismo thing that is just kind of silly and just no. Going big doesn't mean doing the longest race there is possible. Going big, maybe do the race that's good for you and doing the best you can in that race. That's also what that means. So don't try to be the big hero and go 100 miles when you really shouldn't ever do 100 miles, when maybe a half marathon is the right distance for you. It doesn't mean that you have to do the biggest possible thing ever. It means do the race that's right for you and do the best you possibly can. I know, it makes sense, right? I know, we all want to do those really long races, but they're not right for everybody. We all can't do them. I don't know if I'll ever do a 100-mile distance. I would like to do one, but I don't know at this point in my life. I don't know if I'm up for it, if I'm even up for the training. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. I don't know. I can't predict the future, so we'll have to see. You're not sure of your why. If you haven't figured out why you're out there, then now is the time to figure that out before you go on to other races. Why are you out there running? It's important to pin down your why before you go out to conquer a big race. We all need to figure out our running goals, and I've done a full episode on figuring out your why. Running goals are really important, and it can't be for anyone else. You have to have your why for you. I'm doing this for so-and-so. Well, that's fine, but you have to have your why for you as well, or else it's not going to get you through the tough times. You have to have it for yourself. You're going to be investing a lot of time in your training and lots of money. Trust me, running is not a cheap sport. I've done an episode on that as well. And you have to figure out why you're out there. What is keeping you out there, and what is going to keep you from the Give-Up-Itis each and every time you're out there. Like I said, Give-Up-Itis isn't one time that you cut your race, that you cut your training run short. Give-Up-Itis isn't one time that you DNF. It's the continual giving up. It's a continual cutting your training run short. It's the continual DNFs that you might get in races. So that's what it is. And understanding what your why is will keep you out there from getting DNFs. It will keep you out there from cutting your training run short. When it's tough, when it starts to rain, when it's freezing cold, when it's really hot, when it's not going well at all, when you're feeling sick, when all things go wrong, it will keep you out there on the course. And I'll go over that a little bit more in a bit about your why. You're bored of the training you're doing. If you run the same route on the roads or the same trails or the same pace during every run, unless you're that person who likes to do the same thing every day, you're going to get bored. It's time to switch it up. At least do a different course or a different pace once a week. Try something new. Go a different way, or at least do if you do a loop, go the reverse loop. Try something new. If you're on the roads and you don't listen to music, run with music. Or if you're on the roads and listen to music, run without music. Try something different. Do something that you haven't done before to try to make it more interesting. Running should always be interesting, and if you're bored, then you got to do something to make it more interesting. If you run alone, try running with a friend. See if that makes it more interesting. If you run with people, run by yourself. Try to do something that makes it more interesting for you. You're not getting enough sleep, rest, or downtime. Now, this is what I talked about before. If you are running too much, your body is trying to tell you that you're not resting enough. I'm not a huge believer in streak running where you run a mile every day. I really believe that most people, some people can do it, most people need a rest day where you're not running. And maybe you go for a walk instead, or maybe you ride a bike leisurely, not really, really high velocity, but just more leisurely, maybe a beach bike or something like that, a leisurely bike ride, or something more relaxing, a relaxing swim or something like that, or even just do nothing at all, maybe some light yoga or something. But just everybody needs a downtime. Everybody needs that time to relax and get enough sleep. Your nutrition isn't what it should be. That is the saying. There is the saying, you are what you eat. So if you eat junk, how can you expect to get quality running out of it? You're comparing yourself to others, either in a race or seeing others out there running in the same area that you are. We do have the terrible habit of making ourselves feel bad because we run slower than they do. At the start of the race, you can feel bad if you're not Usain Bolt by jumping and sprinting out in the start of the race. Well, I'm never going to do that. I'm one of the slowest people at the start line. I am usually, in a trail race, the last person. I just am. I'm a slow starter, and it doesn't get any faster than that. I just don't believe in sprinting out at the start of a race, especially a long race. I'm not going to use up all my energy at the start of the race. That's just not going to happen. Bothers me sometimes. It bothered me at Ruth Anderson, and it bothered me at Hunter Thompson. It did not bother me at Bootleg Boogie, because I'll tell you, those first 2 miles of the race are uphill and a beast. And it was already 70 degrees at 9 a.m. So it's like, I'm not going to run up this hill at all. And some runners did. Some runners ran the whole time. It's like, good for you. I'm not going to do that. It's like, nope. But I walked, I hiked quickly. I wasn't slow. I hiked quickly up the hill, and I was good with that. And I felt no guilt or anything. So it's like, fine, you guys all take off and I'll just do my thing. And I didn't burn myself out either. I know some people were having a hard time later on in that race, and I said, well, maybe you shouldn't have sprinted up that hill, but that's okay. That's all right. Lots of runners forget their training plans by sprinting at the start of a race because they want to be the first out or something like that. I don't know. I mean, unless it's a 5K, if it's an ultra, don't act like it's a 5K. It is not. You've got to conserve that energy. So because you all of a sudden think that you're going to be racing these people in a fast race, I don't know, unless you're like an elite runner, don't start too fast. Don't compare yourself to other people in the race. You're doing your own race, especially in a longer race. You're probably not going to see these people at all during the race, and you'll spend a lot of time by yourself. So don't worry about what they do. You do you. Here's some ways about how not to give up. Know that you're not alone. It's human to want to give up. The truth is, no one is superhuman, even if they may seem like it. No runner is. There's a couple of runners. Courtney is one of them. Killian is another, but not many are. Everyone feels like giving up at least once on a training run or race, and that's perfectly fine. I'm sure even they feel like giving up. And in running, as in life, there will be days out there when giving up will seem like the best choice, and maybe it will be. Maybe there will be a training run where you just don't feel it and you're going to give up and go back home, and that's perfectly fine. But if you start to make a habit out of it, then that's giving up itis, and we don't want to do that if at all possible. Now, I'm going to encourage you not to do that, and I'm going to give you some 5 ways to not do that. And I adapted these from a website that I got them from about how not to give up on life, and I'll give you the link to the website on my website, martharunstheworld.com. Okay, acknowledge that you are human. Some days our running will be better than others, and that's just a fact. There will be times when what you feel like will not help you in making it to your end goal or desired outcome in your training run or your race. In your training run, okay, I've got 20 miles to do today, but you may only get to 13 or 14 and you're just not feeling it to the end. And maybe that's okay that day. But if you've got a couple times to get those 20 miles out, or you only have this one day to do it, you should probably get as far as you can. I realize that if you get to 18 miles and you don't get those last 2 out, that's fine. That's not the end of the world. But if you get to 13 and you don't feel like going farther, you should probably get at least a couple more miles out, because stopping at 13 is probably not the best thing for your training. Try to go a little farther if you can. Choosing not to give up during a run can at times be a second-by-second, step-by-step choice. It may, a minute by minute, maybe say, okay, I'll go 1 more minute, and then say, okay, I'll go another minute. Okay, I'll go another minute. The human side of us tries to avoid anything unpleasant, uncomfortable, difficult. Well, not like that came from that website. But of course, we're runners, so we jump straight into unpleasant, uncomfortable, and difficult situations. Then I thought to myself, what's wrong with us anyway? Yeah, we're different than everybody else, aren't we? Okay, but try to keep going if you can, even if it's by minute. Say, I'll give myself 3 minutes to keep going. See how I feel, and then determine it. And then I'll give myself 3 more minutes and see how I feel. And see if you can keep going that way. I've done that before, and it actually kind of works. It does. It says, or anything like that. Or I'll go to the end of the street and see how I feel. I mean, just do something to keep yourself going. Take time to breathe and reset. And I talked about this already a little bit. When feeling overwhelmed, that's not the best time to make decisions about quitting your run or quitting your race. If you're really emotional in aid station or something like that, and you just feel like everything sucks and you don't really want to keep going with your race, then that's the time to sit in a chair, take a few minutes, tell the people at the aid station, can you give me 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes, get me going again? If you have 10 minutes on the clock, of course. If you don't, then maybe 5 minutes, 2 minutes, but sit there and say, okay, I'm going to calm myself down. I'm going to have something to eat or drink. I'm going to sit there and chill and just breathe a little bit and get some clarity. And you need to rest. And sometimes after that, you'll feel better, and then you'll want to keep going. If you keep cutting your training run short, then maybe take a rest day. Take one of your training runs, maybe not your long day training run, but maybe one of your other training runs off, and get some rest and try to think, why are we doing this? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough rest? That's really important. And that's an important question to ask ourselves. Are you getting enough rest in between your runs? Prepare and plan, realizing things won't always go according to that plan. Most of us don't always give, and this is me included, don't always give ourselves realistic expectations when preparing for races, especially for our big race. You have a big race in the year or in the season, and do you think to yourself, what if this or that goes wrong? What will I do? Well, we definitely don't plan for things to go sideways. Well, we should. I mean, I won't say definitely, but a lot of us don't. And this means we need to plan and prepare for things to not go according to plan. It's always good to have a plan A, plan B, and plan C, and maybe even a plan D. Let's say if your dream goal is to get a PR in your 50K. Okay, that's your plan A. But if it turns out to be a very warm day, okay, a hot day, you're not going to get that PR because you don't do well in hot weather. So the PR is out of question. So you turn to your plan B, run a good race, have a fun finish with time left on the clock. But then what if you start to struggle? What if you're not doing well? Then you turn to your plan C, which is finish before the cutoff. All right, there you go. You're all set. So you have these things and you stick to them. So you have your plan A, plan B, and plan C. So there you are. And you can do that with your training runs too. You can say, this training run, I really want 22 miles, but I'll settle for 20 miles, but I have to get 18. So, but don't think of it that way until you get to where you're struggling, because you may only want to get 18. It's kind of tricky with the training runs, I've found. Go back to your why and focus on that. Without a definitive why for our running, we may find ourselves stuck, questioning our very reason for being out there. And this is where it's really important. Think about when you started running. If that was a long time ago, try to remember the excitement you got or how hard it was to start running. But you worked through that, didn't you? And how exciting those first few races were. This really helps me when I get really stuck about it, when I want to quit really bad. It didn't help me in the Hunter Thompson. That was a different thing. But it certainly helped me push through my in my bootleg boogie race. And there were times I wanted to quit. I pushed through, I kept going, and I kept myself with a mantra. I just kept myself going. I gave myself time, and I figured out, why am I out here? I'm out here because I want to finish this race, because I couldn't do it last year. And I was so determined to finish it. So I thought back about my running. I thought back about how I couldn't do it last year, and I thought back to that. And that really kept me going. If you only started running not very long ago, ask yourself why you become so detached from it in such a short amount of time. Perhaps you haven't given yourself a reasonable amount of time to be a beginner. Many runners are not patient enough to actually learn running. They want to be sprinters right from the start. Running takes years of training, and it's not a forgiving sport if you try too much too soon. So I would say slow down, maybe not do so much at a time, and go back to enjoying it and not try to do these giant races too quickly. And go back to the burnout that I talked about earlier. Get help when you need it. If you feel that you've taken yourself as far as you can in running by yourself, then maybe it might be time to look for a running coach. Now, yes, it is expensive, but it might be worth it if you think you can get more out of it. And also, you can find less expensive alternatives through online groups. AI coaching. I'm going to do a whole episode on AI, the good and bad of AI and running. So I'll talk about that in the future, and I'll go through all that later on. But it won't have the same connection as a personal coach, but it's also not as pricey. So you may want to think about doing that. And it might give you some more insight and more inspiration into running that you may need. But you think about that, and it might help you in the long run. There are reasons why we fall into the giving-up-itis syndrome, as I'll call it. And I know why I did it. I just wasn't inspired. And I think this trip to Boulder City helped me get a little bit more inspiration to keep going. I have a big race in June where I'll do my first 50 miler. So I'm going to talk about my training and how it goes over the weeks. I had a long work week this week, so I didn't get a whole lot of running in, but I'm going to go out later today and run. And I will talk about my training next week. I'll start to talk about it, and I'll go over all that. And there'll be lots of other episodes with lots of fun stuff. I've got a couple races coming up this spring, a half-miler in May and my 50-miler in June, and maybe some more races. I don't know yet. I really don't know how many more races I'm going to do this year, but I will talk to you about them in the future. All right, so that is today's episode, and the website is martharunstheworld.com, and my email is martharunstheworld@gmail.com. And thank you so much for joining me. And on that note, let's tie up our shoelaces and go for a run.